Okay, so that's the 20th podcast, and quite appropriate. We are at conclusion. Capacity development for resilience is nothing new just because we started to call it that the last decade or so. So its intellectual roots date back to the 1950s, and though we have learned a lot over the decades, much of the theoretical underpinnings are still similar to where we started. The periodic name changes for what we now call capacity development have, in other words, been more reactions to poor implementation in practice than anything else. So people try something, when it doesn't work, you try to change the name. Or, I mean, sometimes it has logic behind it in terms of bringing a different focus or so. Considering the continuously poor results of much capacity development, it's interesting to speculate for how long we will use this name to describe our efforts to support other actors in developing their capacities. So we have external partners helping internal partners develop their capacity for resilience. However, I hope the concept is here to stay and that we focus our frustration and efforts on doing what we are supposed to do in theory instead of wasting more energy by continuing this seemingly perennial renaming exercise. Ad hoc and short-term projects and programs do not suffice regardless of what we call them. Instead, capacity development for resilience entails holistic and systematic action that addresses all significant links in the causal chains behind particular challenges, interdependencies that we talked about. It must address these challenges on all necessary levels, including developing knowledge, skills, tools, and other resources, organization on all levels, rules, regulations, and other formal institutions, and norms, values, and other informal institutions. So this is pretty much like what we are saying in the podcasts that cover the book Sustaining the Commons. So that's in a different set of podcasts. To be able to do so, a capacity development initiative must be designed, implemented, and evaluated with attention to dependencies in both the human environment system in question and the project or program as such. The version of the logical framework approach presented in this chapter is a useful tool for accomplishing that by providing guidelines for analyzing the current situation, describing the preferred situation so you create a vision for it, and designing projects and programs that can take the human environment system from the current state that we are not happy with, full of risks, and to the latter, which is our preferred state. In addition to the more project or program oriented logical framework approach, the 14 factors concerning roles, responsibilities, relationships, and skill sets is also a useful framework for explaining, understanding, and improving effectiveness of capacity development for resilience. Anything you do here, just like in adaptation or mitigation or net zero implementation or sustainability implementation, effectiveness and efficiency are very important because often it's a zero-sum game and resources are limited, so you cannot while away the resources when they are available. Often they are not available even when you have a good plan, etc. In short, effective capacity development requires sufficient amount of all 14 factors, though several of them overlap or depend on each other. Voices might be raised for aggregating them into a smaller set through factor analysis or some qualitative method, but that would beat the purpose of the framework in the first place. So we had three in understanding the current system, and then the objectives, and then programs and projects, right? So it is intended as a mental map when thinking about the capacity development as a joint effort of internal and external partners, guiding us in designing projects and programs that can generate sustainable change. Hence, capacity development for resilience is a double design problem, though the softer objectives and indicators concerning ownership, partnership, relationship, etc. are rarely explicitly included. In other words, the activities are generally only designed to generate the expected results. Let me turn on the fan here, it's very hot. Oops. I have a little fan here. I'm not running the AC as usual, so sorry about that. So let's read this again. In other words, the activities are generally only designed to generate the expected results to meet the purpose of the project or program that are focused on developing the capacities of the human environment system to perform key functions for its resilience as such, not to generate the expected results necessary for developing vital roles, responsibilities, relationships, and other skill sets which are also requisites for effective capacity development. So it's an incomplete, projectized, microized, as we said before. No wonder the overall results are generally insufficient. The way forward is to explicitly acknowledge the importance of these softer issues when designing, implementing, and evaluating capacity development initiatives. Not just talking about them and hope they are addressed as some fortunate byproduct of the other activities. They need explicit attention. Let us include the objectives, indicators, and activities that are directly addressing clear roles and responsibilities, allowing time to build relationships of mutual trust, developing these other skill sets, etc. That is how capacity development for resilience can become the key tool for sustainable development that it has been intended to be since the beginning, which let's say is the 1950s that we talked about in terms of the origin of this idea of capacity development. So that's the conclusion from the book. So I'm just going to go back and see if we can talk about the 14 specifics that we looked here. 14 central aspects of capacity development for resilience. We looked at the Spirovic diagram. We start here, let's say ownership, partnership, relationship, friendship, bipartisanship, scholarship, craftsmanship, grantsmanship, penmanship, authorship, mentorship, stewardship, leadership, and championship. Right? So sounds qualitative, and yet each one has been described, and obviously they are not all mutually exclusive, and subtle differences do matter when the actual implementation of projects and proposal and programs for development of capacity development for resilience is happening, and some are very critical. For example, you need scholarship, and you need bipartisanship, you need stewardship and leadership, and championship may or may not exist explicitly separately from leadership. Ownership is an absolute must, and of course you need grantsmanship to get the funding, and penmanship to make sure the reports are happily telling the funders that progress is being made. And you need mentorship, where there is somebody with expertise and the patience to be the sounding board and the alarm bell, let's say, or the mirror to reflect what is going well and what needs to be considered more deeply, and reflection needed, etc., etc. Okay, so this is a nice long chapter, and hopefully you can find examples and think about how developing for capacities for resilience is happening and how the components are evolving, because we talked about I will want to pull another another chart here before we leave, and that is this one, the steps for logical framework approach, where the first 3 steps are for assessing the current situation, current state, then defining objectives to reach the preferred state and how to get to the preferred state. So we analysis of project context, stakeholder analysis, and situation analysis give us a map of the current risk situation or current situation and its risks, and the objectives to define and analyze the assumptions and so on for the preferred state. And to get to the preferred states, you need projects and programs to actually make the actual implementation possible. So you have to plan activities, plan for resources, have indicators to monitor and evaluate to make sure progress can be tracked, internal risk analysis and management, and then analysis of assumptions, so that you are not caught unawares of what you assumed and where you want it to be and why you are not getting there, and so on and so forth. Okay, so sounds a bit theoretical, and it is in that sense, but as we said already in the chapter itself, getting beyond theory and implementing is always important. So there the expertise may lie in somebody you think is just a lay person, but is actually sitting on mountain of knowledge from experience that has to be considered for implementing the projects and programs. Okay, so meet in the next chapter then.